This is the pretty badass Kelly Klein, and you are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the interactive interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com. Well, hello there. Welcome again to Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on WrestlingEpicenter.com. Today we have a Ring of Honor, Woman of Honor. The undefeated Kelly Klein joins us for her first time on Wrestling Epicenter. Hope you guys enjoy this interview. Afterwards, we have Scott Vaudry and Patrick Kelly stopping by to talk about the current events in professional wrestling as well. So I hope you enjoy this broadcast here at the Wrestling Epicenter, this edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio featuring the interactive interview. Enjoy.
Hey guys, this is Taylor Hendricks, and you are listening to Wrestling Epicenter. Check it out.
Throw some metal, show a little skin, looking for some trouble if she can get in. Come with me, I know where to go, I know what you like, I know where you want it. Give it the gate, tell up the master. She wants more, give it to master.
Hey, what's up? It's the ODB, and you're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio. Boom!
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. On the Newsmaker line with me right now is one of the most legitimate female performers of the modern era, the pretty badass Kelly Klein of Ring of Honor. Kelly Klein, are you with us?
Hello.
It's good to have you on the show. So here's what's going on. We're going to ask you a couple questions here. I wanted to start out by asking you some questions a little bit different than what you've been asked before, or at least advancing off of what you've been asked before on prior interviews. So you talked a little bit about your background before wrestling. And I got to tell you, I was absolutely stunned to find out that you were not a wrestling fan growing up, because it just kind of exudes that you kind of get it more than most. How is that possible? How is it that you understand this as much as you do without being a dork like me who's been watching it since I was a toddler?
I think that a big part of that is the fact that there are so many other elements that really go into what wrestling is. And if you have an appreciation and an understanding for things like psychology, literature, history, pop culture, all of these things, then you can parlay that into wrestling, and ultimately we are storytellers. So any genre of storytelling is going to hit a crossroads at some point where there are things that they share in common. It's really just a matter of the platform or the media that we as professional wrestlers use to tell our stories.
Absolutely. One of the little things that you do that kind of got my attention, and it's so simple, but it really got my attention, is the little finger gestures in your entrance where you count off how long you've been undefeated. Simple things like that really do stand out in terms of how we perceive the performer, how much we understand about them. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that's something you learned from wrestling training, from maybe in arts, with your college background in arts? Or is it more, I'm a big rock and roll fan, is it more like just being natural stage presence?
I think that that's almost like a catch-22, because, or a chicken or the egg kind of argument.
Okay.
Because in some ways, good wrestling training is going to bring out sort of qualities that somebody may already have, and I think that it feeds back and forth. So you're going to capitalize on that through training if you have somebody that's a good trainer, or you have good mentors that will pick up on those things. And then on the same token, I have to bring that to the table in the first place. So there are some mentors where they'll work out ideas with me, and sometimes it's as simple as I come to somebody and I have an issue that I'm trying to work out, and I'm not really sure how I want to handle it or what direction I want to go. So I start kind of bouncing it off of somebody, and they may give kind of a little bit of feedback or ask me a couple of guiding questions, and then I kind of keep going and formulating something. And then, so in a lot of ways, I'm sort of coming to my conclusion with their guidance. But if I don't come to them with it, then they can't guide me, and they can't facilitate that at all for me. But I do have to come to somebody with that, because if you don't have those ideas and if you don't understand them really intimately, then I don't think that you can always execute them as well and as fully. So in some cases, there may be something where somebody comes with this awesome idea and it's got all of these facets to it, to someone who maybe doesn't fully understand it or isn't completely invested, and they just may not be able to explore it as deeply as somebody who's really entrenched in it.
One of the things that you kind of threw out there in a prior interview, and I was surprised the interviewer didn't ask you, because it definitely interested me, is you mentioned after school you were in a band, and that your first wrestling show you attended with your guitarist. I guess I was kind of curious, what kind of music did you make?
I think that we called it ambient experimental. There's actually some available online. I think it's hosted on Bandcamp, and if you just go and Google options, 100 different spellings, or you can Google 100 options. Bandcamp, if you Google any of those things, put my name in it, you'll come up with the cut, copy, paste album. And all of the female vocals in that album are me. And I collaborated and contributed with a lot of the composition, musical and lyrical. So, you can,
cool.
It's out there, you can find it.
Are you going to pair up with Frankie Kazarian and his band at some point? I'm kidding.
I'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's been on our show. I was joking with him. I had him on 12 years before, and then I had him on again. I said, so what have you been up to? That was my first question. But back to ROH here.
Give me the Cliff Notes version.
There you go. Yeah, just so you've not been doing much. 12 years. My God. Okay, so back to ROH. You're at the last check undefeated, and I was talking to somebody, and they said, why don't they have a women's champion? And I kind of was thinking that undefeated streak kind of makes you the figurehead, the champion of sorts of that division. At least that's how I perceive it. Do you perceive it that way?
I do perceive it that way right now. In lieu of a belt, that's the closest that we have. Now, I think that when a belt does come into play, and I've mentioned this to people before, probably one of the best ways to introduce that would be to host a tournament, because all of the competitors, and first of all, that landscape has changed drastically over the last almost 2 years now, as far as women coming and going, and moving on to different places, or us acquiring new talent, some that are totally fresh new faces. And so it would be really difficult retroactively to, even with a statistician like Ian Riccaboni, to go through and really determine and kind of the level of each person, or the kind of the lineup. So people have had different numbers of matches. Some people have had more tag matches. so many different things that would make it difficult to determine that. So I think that when that does come about, most likely we're going to see a tournament, which I think would be really cool, and to kind of start everybody at kind of a level playing field. Of course, there's still always so many different variables there, but as far as why there is not a championship right now, I think that there are a lot of things that go into that as well. And one of those things is just us having sort of the platform to have kind of a consistent presence, and even just the introduction of a belt you would want that to be on TV, but there is limited TV time, and Ring of Honor has a huge, huge roster as it is, to the point where over the last year, Ring of Honor didn't host as many tryout camps earlier this year as they normally would have. We didn't do a spring one because we had so many people already on the roster. We have too many for the amount of time that we have to present all of these people to our audience. So say, for example, we would have one of the Women of Honor episodes and we introduce the belt. Well, then what? Then do you make the audience wait 6 months to see another women's episode?
Yeah.
And then what do we do with the belt in between then? Because you wouldn't want to have these really good matches but not have it as accessible for people, but you don't just sit on the belt. So really what I'm getting at is, in order to, I think, do justice to something like that, we need to be in a position where we have a little bit more of a consistent platform. And I think we are really getting there. We're getting to the point, and maybe even now, I think it's safe to say we're at the point where we have a core, consistent roster of women. There are over 30 women who have been in and out of Women of Honor over the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. But as far as who we would think of and who people know as, like, okay, this is, kind of the core of the roster. Now we're at the point, I think, where people kind of know who that is. And then, so then from there to have a situation where we can present the product to people on a regular basis and can reach our audience with something like that, that's where then we're getting to the point where I think something like that could be introduced.
That's kind of what I was going to ask in my next question, actually, is that as a wrestling fan, and I'm going to ask you about this a little later on, we're not going to be too much longer, but Ring of Honor seems to split you guys out. You guys appear on the web show. I know you're taped at the same time as the regular stuff, but you're put on the Women of Honor Wednesdays on YouTube, and that's really cool, and it really is something to look forward to, and it definitely is a way to get eyes on your product. However, watching an ROH pay-per-view, like a 3-hour pay-per-view, and I'm not saying this as just a guy who likes to see girls, I'm saying this as a guy who actually appreciates women's wrestling as well, it would help to have the Women of Honor on that show, both for your exposure to the camera as well as to split up what I jokingly called with ODB a sausage fest at times. What is your take on that? Do you think that you guys having girls on the show would be better for you guys? The main shows.
I think that there are some major benefits to that, but there are also going to be people who say, okay, well, whose time do you take? Because that's on the other side, that's how it would be kind of seen on the flip side as, okay, we give you time, but there's a finite amount of time available. So then the sort of trick is, okay, how do we kind of do justice to everything that's going on? There are so many moving parts and all these stories that are being told and propelled forward. And then how do we not fit in, but actually kind of pull a little bit of time here and there from all of those things in order to carve out some time for the women. And it's definitely doable, but it isn't just overnight. It does take some finessing, I think. So I think that's where we are moving toward, and I agree. I think that it would be very valuable, and it's great that people have been watching our YouTube matches, because that's the kind of thing that will back up the argument. Because I can say and you can say, like, hey, no, I know this would be really good and valuable, but there's there's some level where you need the proof and you need the numbers and the stats, and without really having something comparable, there isn't like, okay, well, just, hey, let us just be on the pay-per-view and see how it turns out. Like, nobody likes to do that kind of thing, because
a little bit too much trial.
Dealing with money and time and all of that. So, but I mean, I think right now, honestly, the way people can really let their voices be heard as far as the women and wanting to see more of that is like, yes, the YouTube views are very helpful, but YouTube is free. So then, that's great that people want to see it, but they want to know, is somebody going to pay for a pay-per-view, for an iPay-per-view with the women on it when it's not free? So when people buy the iPay-per-view that we did last year, or buy the DVDs featuring the women, or buy the Women of Honor T-shirts, that's honestly the way that you tell the powers that be that it's a smart move on their part, because they're more interested, in the smart business move, and that's they need to be, because if they're not and it crashes and burns, then I don't have a place to work. So I support that, but to kind of get more of the women included and get more of a crossover, where there's more of a consistent presence on the weekly episodic show, that's definitely somewhere that we want to go.
Excellent. Got to ask you about this. I kind of name dropped a few times, and I don't like to do that, but one of our guests that we had on, actually the week of the airing, when you made her tap out or pass out in the match, was ODB. I think that really was a match that made a lot of people open their eyes to you, not only because it was actually on the ROH show, but you beat a well-known female performer with your own move. How did you feel about that match and how it came off? And was that as big for you as it seemed to be for us watching?
It was really big for me, and maybe for a reason that a lot of people don't realize. For me, it was mostly because I worked with ODB only one other time since I started wrestling, and it was when I was very, very new. It was, I don't know if it was it was easily one of my first few singles matches. I mean, it was really early. I almost want to say it was like a first, but it was at a time where I really hadn't fully transitioned even into wrestling in the ring. I had been training, but I had been appearing on events as a valet or a manager, and I got the phone call like, hey, she's going to be here and she wants to know if she can wrestle. And I was it. So I was very green and very new, and I got to work with her, and it was a very good learning experience for me at the time. And it was always, I've mentioned this even before I saw her again. I've mentioned this many times, that it was one of my favorite matches looking back on, just because she was so great to work with, and I learned so much. But it was a great experience because she made it so, because she really got me through that. And when I when I found out I was going to get to work with her again, it was exciting because I was a totally different athlete, a different performer, and really a different person. Just completely a different person. So for me, it was kind of coming full circle. And this time I knew that I was going to be able to contribute. So it was a little bit more riding on it for me in a way to kind of give back to her that, hey, okay, I can pull my own weight now. And so that was what was really important to me, was to be able to go one-on-one with her as a peer now, and more as where we could face off more on the same level. And so that meant a lot to me, and it was very important for me to just really bring it. And I think that we both did. And there's every match I have, and every time I am on an event, I will look back and there are things that I think I wish I would have done differently, but that's all part of the learning experience. So, that's always looking back and going, okay, how can I, do better next time? So there were things that I looked back and I learned from, and even some things I actually thanked Nigel McGuinness, because I watched the match and I listened to his commentary, and he brings up some really good points about just some of my approach and my technique. And so I listened to those things, and I watched and I saw where I could make some of those changes and apply the things that he mentioned. So I told him, I said, hey, I listened to that, and, thank you. I'm definitely going to use those things to try to improve. So I did that, but really the experience of the match, and I think that our I guess performance, and the outcome and the perception, and the feedback and everything was really great. And then just, like you said, to be in that main event position on the TV episode, and on a sort of one of the year-end episodes. And it also meant a lot that we had a second episode, because that meant that the first episode did well enough that they said, okay, you can get another hour of TV. So, and I was on the main event of the first episode, which was a huge honor to me too. So to be able to be in that position, and then be entrusted to do it again, was, that's something that means a lot to me. So definitely it was definitely big to me for a lot of reasons.
Absolutely. Well, I told you I'd keep you 15 minutes. We've already done that. Do you have time for just a couple more questions? Okay.
Sure.
Involves ODB, and a guest that I was about to have on, Lufisto, who is actually having some health issues. He ended up having to cancel on me, as we talked about before off the air, about not announcing things. She was going to come on to promote a book, and in the book they talk about women's wrestling. In fact, that's the focus of this book. So I wanted to ask you, from somebody who doesn't have a proverbial dog in the fight, ODB would tell you that the knockouts kind of started the women's revolution to what we see now. Stephanie McMahon in this book says that the WWE obviously created the women's revolution. From somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight and is working for kind of the other company, what is your take? Who kind of started this, or is it a chicken and the egg thing again?
It's not a chicken and the egg thing, I don't think, in my opinion. And I think that if you look, again, as I said, when you look outside of wrestling at other things like history, the person who writes the history book is, it's always the winner kind of thing.
I use that expression a lot.
So, of course, yeah. So, yeah, the person with maybe more money behind the product and more exposure is going to claim that. I think that the WWE has done and is doing some great things for the women's wrestling revolution, but at this point, it's, I think, a sort of a collaborative effort, or they're pushing it forward, and other companies and independent companies are all pushing it forward, and so it's evolving, because one thing that I've pointed out before is that there are so many women now who are training and excelling in the lower levels of wrestling. And I think a lot of that is because now they see that there is a payoff and there's a role for them and there's a place for them. Whereas maybe, 10 years ago, even when, I was starting, there were very limited roles. That was when the knockout started, so there were more roles, and I remember when that happened, and that was a big deal. It was a big deal for women, because it was like, oh my gosh, there's more than 2 spots per week on TV for a woman. So there's something to kind of accomplish, and there's not such a limited field. So then, and even before that, when a woman was an athlete and a performer, how, I guess, prudent would it be to go into something that there was a very slim chance that she could really get past that glass ceiling, and of course I went ahead and went for it anyway, as did a lot of women, because, maybe we're crazy, but that's, I think, a necessary quality. So
I think that qualifies for
I
fans
think that
too,
everyone,
by the way.
Sure, yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I would say, as far as kind of spurring it, I think that the knockouts really had a huge role in that. And again, I think that's something where a company like WWE could see, oh, there are ratings and there is money in this, doing it this way. Maybe we should get on that. And then, yeah, they opened huge doors, because they did eventually start to do that. It took a long time to really, I think, really go for it, but now they are definitely doing that. And there's also that just the exposure that WWE has. So no matter who kind of started doing it first, they brought it to a lot of places first, just because of the reach and the exposure and the platform. So had they not done that, maybe we wouldn't have as much momentum. But I just think it's like we all kind of keep taking steps, and that allows everyone else to take a step. So it's like maybe the knockouts kind of jumped on it and started it, and then WWE sees, okay, we should get on that, and they do, and then it opens the door for the independents and the training and the women, and and then because of that, now we've got all of these women available, and even more fan interest and more data supporting fan interest, that people are going to put their time and their money into it. And then that even improves our division at Ring of Honor, and the division at TNA, and the division at WWE, because now we've got all of these women who are training. We've got a bigger pool, and because of a bigger pool, there's more competition. So we're all competing even harder with each other. So in order to get to that level, we have to be that much better.
I agree.
It's funny in a way. It's like there's supply and demand sometimes, where even though there are more spaces available, now there are even more women going for those spots. So we do have to be working even harder and be at the top of our game, and then always improving. So it's a really interesting situation, but I love it because it creates competition among us and within ourselves to be the best, and that's how you get something like this. It's when we're all just working harder and trying to kind of one up each other in that sort of friendly, sometimes not so friendly competition. I guess it depends on who's involved, but for me, it's always I'm thrilled when women do well, because it means it lights that fire for me that I have to do even better if I want to stay kind of in the running or in the same level.
There's been rumors, and rumors are rumors, but there's been rumors about who's going to be involved in this upcoming WWE Mae Young tournament, and some of those names include former TNA knockouts, include women we've more recently seen on Lucha Underground. Is that something that even is on your radar, that you would even consider an opportunity like that?
I am just going to say that I would always consider any opportunity. Every opportunity has many, many variables, many seen and many unforeseen. So I'm not one that would ever say, oh, I would never do this or never work for this place, or that, my goal is, oh, I have to work at this place or I have to do this. Every situation and every opportunity is different and has to be considered individually.
Absolutely. All right. Final question for you, and it kind of goes to what you were just saying. What is your ultimate goal to accomplish in both Ring of Honor and in professional wrestling? At what point do you sit back, and I can see you as the type who would do this, and say, I'm happy with what I did? At what point would that happen for you?
I am a very goal-oriented person, but I'm also a sort of intrinsically motivated person, which means that my goals may not be the goals that other people would recognize or see.
Okay.
So for me, it's really about being at my peak and at my best. And yes, I want to make a living, and for the first time, I'm really starting to make a living at wrestling where I don't have to supplement it with other things. So that's a huge step and a huge accomplishment for me. But the things that really kind of motivate me are knowing if I'm doing my best and if I'm pushing myself as hard as I can. And that doesn't always mean that you're working for a certain company or that you hold a belt or, whatever it is. It means that, that I'm performing at my peak. It means that I'm generally respected and appreciated by my peers, things like that. So I guess that it's kind of hard for me really to quantify my goals in a way. It would be really nice to be able to say, I want a main event, such and such event. But I don't do that because a couple of reasons. If something like that weren't to happen, if I had such a specific goal like that, I personally wouldn't be disappointed. But I know that there are people who have such specific goals that in a way kind of hinder them because they have the blinders on. And then if they don't achieve it, even if it's completely through no fault or any lack of effort on their part, sometimes just things don't work out that way. There are people that would be disappointed and feel like they didn't succeed, even if that's not really the case. And another huge thing for me is that I didn't even know to ever make what's happening right now one of my goals. It wasn't even on my radar. A big part of that is because Women of Honor didn't exist. So, how would I have known, like, oh, I would like to be a part of a relaunch for a women's division during the women's revolution in wrestling?
There's no way you could have predicted that.
Not necessarily something that
you would have
I
needed
would have.
Miss Cleo's tarot
Yeah,
cards or something for that one.
Right. So, that's something that would have been great to dream of, like, hey, I hope there's a women's revolution and I hope I'm a pivotal part of it. But I feel like had I pigeonholed myself into such a specific goal or outcome, I very well could have missed, and in some ways almost did miss what's happening now, because I was for a long time surrounded by people who had very specific goals, and those goals excluded a lot of other possibilities. So I was kind of missing some other possibilities. But fortunately, I did decide one day that I was going to just put myself out there and try. And that's when I, thought, you know what, I'm gonna go to this Ring of Honor tryout. And at that time, I didn't even know that they were going to relaunch a women's division. I went to that knowing that they don't have really many women that wrestle, and they're not putting on women's matches. So I don't know what, again, crazy, what was I doing going for kind of a spot that, as far as I knew, wasn't there. But I did, I did have some encouragement, from people saying that there maybe potentially could be some things, and there's always potential just with the men and the women. If you don't have a job, or there's not a job, you create yourself one, or you make them have to create a spot for you. So that's what the women kind of have been doing, by expanding this, by saying, okay, no, you have to have me, and you have to have her, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's I kind of, one thing that I do like to say for people who are trying to accomplish things is that vague goals create vague results. So it's sort of a, I guess a little bit of a conundrum there, because while I do say, yes, have specific goals, I think there are certain ways to make those goals specific without excluding all of the different possibilities.
All right, so we obliterated that 15-minute thing we talked about. Final thing to ask you, and this is more of a favor than anything else. Would you mind, we always start the interview with a clip of somebody saying, this is so-and-so, and you're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio. Do you mind giving us one of those liners?
Did you ever see Homestar Runner?
No, I can't say that I did.
You know what I'm talking about? There's a character, I think, in one of their little things called Teen Girl Squad named so-and-so.
Okay.
So I just thought, what if I just said, this is so-and-so?
No.
But yes, I can do that. So say it again. At interactivewrestlingpodcast.com.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Okay. I was like, I'm mixing it up with Homestar Runner.
I totally screwed you up.
Okay.
I totally screwed you up. And a lot of people have made the, when I count you down, they made the Wayne's World joke too. So there's a lot out there. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2.
This is the pretty badass Kelly Klein, and you are listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Bam. First take and you nailed it. How do you like that?
I actually, one of my special skills is bumpers and lead-ins. It's a very, very specific skill, but
that's very cool. All right. Well, you did awesome. I appreciate that. I hope that was okay for you as well.
Thank you.
This is the king of old school, Steve Corino, and you're listening to Interactive Interview.
If you want to conquer something, you must be ready for a war.
This is insane. Lucha Underground is out of this world. I've never seen anything like this.
Lucha Underground Season 3. New episode Wednesday at 8 p.m. on El Rey Network.
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. It's James Walsh, joined as always by my buddy Patrick Kelly. Patrick, are you there?
I'm here, James. How have you been, man?
Doing good, Pat. And joining us for the second time is independent wrestling referee Scott Vaudry. Scott, are you there?
Yes, sir.
And he's got himself hung on the wall at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame Museum, which is pretty cool. So congratulations on that, Scott. I know you're very proud of that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was all Johnny did that. That was nice of him.
Absolutely, absolutely. So here's what's going on, guys. We just finished up our interview with the very, very lovely and very, very talented Kelly Klein. And we talked a little bit about this off air, guys, and I'm going to say this on air. Kelly is a fantastic talent. I mean, my God, one of the best female talents there is. And this is something that I wanted to get across because I don't think I successfully did so during the interview. What I dig about her persona is the nuances. When she comes to the ring, she does a finger gesture counting out how many days she's been undefeated in Ring of Honor, Women of Honor. Now, Patrick knows from knowing me, a lot of times the big shit, just like, I don't care, I expect it. But the little nuances, I kind of pop for huge. And that kind of thing is like, hey, this person is actually creating something unique to themselves and is a part of their entrance instead of being a chicken head and running to the ring and flopping around like a lot of the other girls do. So I really think that I wanted to get that point across because I don't know that I did so successfully during the interview. But like I said, nuances and creating these little things that set you apart is why I really like this performer, and I think that she's on to big things. And I mean, look what she's done already with the Ring of Honor, Women of Honor, and I think that we're seeing that grow exponentially, and probably we'll see that continue to grow as time goes by.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that. I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen much of Kelly Klein. I've seen her a couple of times, and I like what I've seen. I follow her on Facebook as well. But, yeah, it's those little nuances that really separate talents and separate the greats from the I don't want to say the guys that don't make it, but, I mean, when I think back on some of my favorite wrestlers of all time, the Randy Savages, the Bret Harts, the Rick Rudes, those type of guys that really put that little extra flavor on their character that may go unnoticed, probably do go unnoticed when you go into like the star rating Dave Meltzer style of reviewing a wrestling show or something, but it's those little things that I appreciate and really set talents apart from each other.
Absolutely. Scott, what do you think of that? What do you guys, you're on the inside, so Scott's got a different perspective on everything, but do you get what I mean by little nuances and little things that people do differently that kind of make them just jump off the page a little differently than your usual?
Oh, yeah, that's what I look for, too.
All right. Well, here's what we're going to discuss here, guys. We were talking off air about Ring of Honor and why the Women of Honor don't have their own championship belt. And during the interview, Kelly Klein says that basically, well, we don't have a championship belt, but I am undefeated, so that's kind of what we make the nucleus of it at the moment, is that I'm undefeated, so we have that. I think they need a belt. I mean, I really just think that they need a belt. I think that the conditioned mind of a wrestling fan is that the belt is the nucleus, and that's where it needs to be. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes and no. I don't think if they're already over, they don't need a belt. If they have maybe like some kind of annual tournament, it can build up to that. Who's going to be the number one seed, and that can be like an equivalent, I think.
I think that could be. What do you think, Pat?
I'm building off of that a little bit. I kind of like that tournament idea, but I think there needs to be some kind of a prize because, all right, like you said, James, Kelly Klein is undefeated. And they're kind of gearing all their storylines around that. My question is, what happens when she finally gets beat?
Is there a plan? Is it going to be like Goldberg, where there's no next plan? Okay, now what? You know.
Well, even with Goldberg, it's like, all right, there's still a belt. There's still an ultimate prize to fight for. And, again, whether it's an annual tournament or a championship or whatever, that's great that they have an undefeated streak to build a storyline around, and I think that's awesome. But you got to start thinking past that. It's like, all right, once that's over with, what do we do next? And I think having that ultimate prize and having something for all the girls to kind of shoot for helps kind of center the division and give it a lot more credibility and give the fans more reason to pay attention, quite honestly. Because there could be the interpretation that they're just having matches, but they aren't really going anywhere. If you have a championship involved, then it's like, okay, now it's like they've got something to fight for, and they have like a goal to ultimately strive for.
Now,
or they could maybe they can get team up with Shimmer or New Japan or something and use their champion, like a heel traveling champion, so they fight for who gets a shot at that.
That's interesting.
Could be that'd be a great idea.
I'll tell you what I don't like, though, and I'm going to say this even though I'm probably going to be emailing in the next couple of weeks for an interview. I don't like on Impact that there's two sets of titles, the Impact titles and then there's the Global Force titles, because it's like if there's too many belts, it just seems to be meaningless to me.
Have you seen spoilers for the next couple of Impacts?
Honestly, no, I have not. I've posted them, but I've deliberately not read them because I actually enjoy watching the show. At some point, I'll crack and read them. But why? Why did you reference that? Go ahead and spoiler alert me.
Spoiler alert for those of you who don't know. Anybody feel free to stop me at this point. 3, 2, 1. Okay, spoiler. At Slammiversary, they're going to unify the belts. So,
okay,
it's in the works. I believe it's going to be Alberto versus Lashley for the 2 world titles. I think it's Rosemary and Sienna for the 2 women's titles, and I think I'm not sure. I may have missed something, but I think LAX is either already holding or they're going to win the GFW titles, so they'll already be the unified champions. I think. I'm not 100% sure on the tag titles, but the ultimate goal is to unify all the belts.
Absolutely. All right, so
I think those belts are kind of pointless. The GFW ones, I don't think they really had any kind of lineage or were ever defended or anything.
No, they don't have any. They don't have any lineage. But what happened was, Karen Jarrett came out and said, "We're going to merge the 2 companies," and by that, my first thought is, okay, then that basically negates GFW, and instead, then they kind of gave him more of a presence on the show almost immediately after, and it's like, that kind of defeats the object, if you ask me. But maybe I'm seeing it wrong. But there you go. So Patrick, with his comment, kind of okay, you shot down what I was talking about.
Derailed it, didn't I?
Yeah, you really did derail it. Yeah, you got my.
I mean, another.
My little bitch went nowhere because you kind of crushed it. It's been dealt with.
One thing you could say and could compare it to, I've never liked it, and this is when WWE did the first brand split, and I don't like it now. I don't like that the women's division is spread across 2 shows, and I don't like the tag division is spread across 2 shows, because I think first of all, they don't have enough talent to fill 2 divisions, so it just feels like they've got like 3 or 4 girls on one show, 3 or 4 girls on another show, and then they've got 3 or 4 tag teams and so on and so on. When to me, it would give the division more depth if all of the tag teams were on one show and maybe all of the women were on another show. But I think separating it into 2 separate divisions kind of divides everything and makes the divisions feel less important than they should.
I would agree. Part of the reason, though, that Scott's joined us tonight, and I wanted to do this with Patrick on the line, too, because me talking to myself would be completely pointless. But there was a story that broke a few weeks ago, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to tell you what the story is, and then I'm going to correct what the perception of the story is. The story was posted initially, or the post was originally posted by Rip Rogers, who actually was sent this graphic and shared it because he thought it was funny. From that, Randy Orton shared it, and as such, Randy Orton is given the credit as if this was his rant. Long story short, Randy Orton shared a post talking about how independent wrestling has become nothing but a bunch of dives following a formula, and the crowd chanting, "This is awesome," and "You still got it," and all the other cockamamie chants that the crowd chants. Now, there is legitimacy to the comments, but I wanted to get your guys' take on it, both considering the source, and this is the Randy Orton source, not Rip Rogers. I will never challenge Rip Rogers for two reasons. One, I respect the hell out of him as a legend, and two, he may be damn near a cripple, but I'm still scared to death of the man. So, yeah. Long story short, I wanted to get your guys' take on Randy Orton's criticism of independent wrestling.
Who do you want to go first?
Well, I'll go with Scott this time because you are, you work in that side of things, so I think that you would have more of an opinion from the insider view.
Yeah, I don't like it either. I kind of side with his comment. I don't really like the way some of the formulas are, and some of the they just defy any kind of logic to where it's not. I'm talking about the independence where it's not that logical. It doesn't follow believability, and they're all not every one of them, but a lot of them. And then it goes down to the training. Who trained you, who got you ready, because that's going to be one of the big deals. Who helped you set your mind? Helped you with your mindset on the business. But a lot of them, they do stupid stuff in there that you just want to you scratch your head when you see it. But well, I would never challenge Rip Rogers' rant or Randy Orton because they could both work.
Patrick, what do you think of the comments, especially from the source?
Personal opinion, I guess it kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier with Kelly Klein, and it's those little nuances and those little character moments and character building moments that really help make stars and elevate stars. And I think the rant itself about independent wrestling, yeah, I mean, there is truth to that. You do see those formulaic, paint by numbers, and these guys are great athletes, and they go out there and do these amazing things, but they do it in such a way that it is very much like a formula, and it's like, all right, it looks like every other, I don't want to say every other match, but it feels like 90% of the matches I see. But the truly great talents, the ones that have the experience, that are trained, that know what they're doing, they're the ones that rise above that, and they're the ones that ultimately get the jobs on the big show. I mean, look at the WWE's roster right now. You've got Samoa Joe, Sami Zayn, Finn Balor, Prince Devitt. Right now, you've got Chris Hero in NXT. They brought in Eric Young and Bobby Roode from TNA. And there's so many guys that made names for themselves outside of the WWE on the independent circuit. And those are the guys that were trained properly and made names for themselves and built brands for themselves and overall did very well for themselves. So, yeah, there is that independent formula, but I also think that the cream rises to the top, and the ones that are truly talented break out of that formula, have those character building moments, and ultimately do become stars. And as far as I don't know, this is personal opinion here. I've been kind of down on the WWE lately, so maybe this is just sour grapes. But I feel like nobody is more formulaic than the WWE when it comes to putting on matches. I can almost set a stopwatch to the matches that they have, and it feels weird to me that somebody from the WWE kind of throw independent wrestling under the bus, especially since independent wrestling has given them so many stars. And, I mean, their match types are so formulaic, too. Like I said, they all kind of work the same way. It's face gets initial advantage, then heel takes over, and then they kick out of finishers at the end, and then they do whatever the finish is. And that's pretty much the formula for every WWE match nowadays. And Yeah, it just feels weird to me that a WWE guy would look down on independent wrestling. But
Well, my biggest
even if
problem
there
with it
are
is
some
who is down on independent wrestling. You got Randy Orton, who never ever spent any time on the independents. He never had to. Family name, you get immediately jumped. And by the way, he's on 2.99 strikes on his wellness policy thing, if that's even still a thing. But I don't know. The whole thing bothered me, but the second rant, which is less talked about, is what really bugged me too. You know, a lot of these shows, yeah, you know what? If they do get 500 people in the crowd, that's awesome. And that's good for business, to use a WWE-ism. So yeah, if they get 500 people in the crowd at an independent show, that's phenomenal. I'm happy for that independent. Orton does not seem to have any respect for the idea that there is anything other than WWE out there. And you know what? You know, it's fantastic to me that WWE can travel worldwide and fill a 10,000-seater, and that's great. That's good for the WWE. But it's like having one band to listen to. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways to do things. If you don't... variety is the spice of life. So you need to have those
you always have to have an
independents.
alternative.
Yeah.
Oh, I watched
The good ones.
I think
The good ones, oh yeah. Patrick, I heard Lucha Underground?
Yeah, I watched Lucha Underground last night, and that crowd, that couldn't be more than a few hundred people, the crowd that they have in the temple, but they were excited from start to finish, and I thought it just completely different atmosphere and a completely different show from what you would normally see on any other wrestling product. And yeah, I like having Lucha Underground around. I like having Ring of Honor. I like having Impact Wrestling. I like having New Japan, and there's so many other different options out there because they're all, in their own way, whether you like them or not, they're all different in their own way and stand out and have their own unique styles. Even in WWE, like, NXT is vastly different from what you see on Raw and SmackDown, and it kind of has its own identity. It's really what it is. It's like old school booked wrestling, and really more my style of what I prefer a wrestling show to be booked as. So at least WWE's got me covered there.
Very cool, very cool. Patrick, you said a couple phrases that I use all the time. Cream rises to the top. I wanted to throw this shout out there too. Patrick, when you listened to this interview back, because I know you weren't part of it, when I asked about who started the women's revolution, the answer that Kelly Klein gave first was, history is written by the winners. How many times do I use that expression when I rant about WCW and how that's not how it happened? So that just came to mind when you said cream rises to the top. That and a Macho Man impression, but
Okay.
What the hell? The cream rises to the top. There you go. I had to do it.
So how do you not love Randy Savage? Dude walked by catering that morning and said, I can cut a promo with this. Yeah. Come on, that's great.
Did you ever see the Teen Titans Go episode where they do wrestling?
I did not. I have not watched Teen Titans Go since it started.
Do yourself a favor. If you have a DVR, they show it all the time. When they air the episode, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Beast Boy, who ironically is Greg Sipes as the voice actor, plays Michelangelo on the Ninja Turtles, has an action figure as Michelangelo dressed as the Macho Man, plays Beast Boy doing a character called The Madness. He's doing a Macho Man the whole time.
Oh my goodness.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
That's kind of great.
I actually would like to try to interview Greg Sipes just to ask if he's like a huge closet Macho Man fan. Because there's a lot of things that come up that kind of tie him to it. Anyway, Scott, are you even still there? What's that again? Oh, I don't think he's closeted at all. Yeah, I think you're right. Scott, we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, but I did have you on for a reason. You sent me a poster before we started talking. Wanted to just ask if there's anything you wanted to promote since you're our buddy on the show here.
Oh, yeah, VIP Lucha Libre in Houston, Texas. It's going to be a good one. They've got some pretty big names scheduled from AAA and Liga, the guys they use, whoever's free. but they're they book Pentagon and they book Nieto del Santo and Silver King, and they do a quality lineup, and they draw pretty well. I mean, it's, I don't know, 1,200 to 2,500 people in that building.
Oh, so it won't be appearing on a Randy Orton rant anytime soon.
Oh yeah, well I don't think Randy would be there because it's Lucha Libre.
Yeah, there you go.
But
All right.
he'd probably sit there. He'd probably have a heart attack in the back watching it. But Lowrider. If you haven't seen him, he's really good, and that's a friend of mine. I like meeting with him anytime I can. Just a lot of people. I'll probably do a lot of the American style refereeing for him. I think they kind of wanted that because that lucha style, it's some of it, the referee and stuff, some of it's kind of silly. It's a lot of comedy stuff, and that's not really what I do. But we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, Scott, anything you need to promote in the future, you're always welcome to come on. He was our good buddy. Like I said, if you want to hear him previously, you can check him out on our Manny Villalobos tribute, which had Alex Porto and Rod Price on. So check that out, guys, if you wanted. We had a lot of fun that night. It was kind of a therapeutic thing for all of us, just goofing off. So it was a lot of fun that night. I think people enjoy that.
I just saw Alex last weekend.
How did he look?
Oh, he looks good. He's doing some shows in Florida. He brought in Tokyo Monster and a tag team, the Dirty Blondes. You check them out if you like old school. They're really good, really good. And then of course Tokyo Monster is always really good. Cahagas, have you seen him?
I have not seen him. Have you seen him, Patrick?
You'll watch him. You'll like him. You'll like him.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen him, but that sounds right up my alley.
Very cool.
Yeah, you'll like them. The Dirty
Porto.
Blondes are kind of like the fabulous Blondes that kind of patterned after that, like Eric Embry and Ken Timms, the old Southwest tag team. Sorry, go ahead.
Cool.
Very cool. No, I was just going to say Alex Porto's doing good for himself down with Pro Wrestling 2.0 down in Florida, Central Florida there. So good for him.
Yeah.
Good guy. I'm happy to see him succeed.
He's a smart guy.
He is a smart guy. Too smart for his own good. Last question, and I wanted to ask you guys both this. I'll ask Patrick first, then this is the last thing, then I'll let Scott wrap up with this. Southpaw Wrestling, this whole comedy thing that WWE is doing, I don't like it. I think it's disrespectful to the...
You don't like it?
Stuff. I don't like it. I think it's disrespectful.
What is it? I don't even know what it is.
I haven't seen it.
Basically, it's Luke Gallows and John Cena was on a couple of them and a bunch of the other guys trying to run or do these like ridiculous Southern wrestling promos like you would have seen on some of the like Knoxville area wrestling shows back in like 1983.
Like the old Fuller and Jarrett shows, Ron Fuller and Jarrett shows.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah, that kind of stuff. Maybe even a little bit of World Class thrown in, but it's kind of like all done. They'd say it's done in a way to honor. I kind of view it as you're being a dickhead. I don't think that's funny. I think that's disrespectful. Without that stuff, you wouldn't be here. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
I honestly haven't seen it, so I don't have an opinion of it one way or the other.
Well, when you get the chance, Pat, just type in your little network search box there on type in Southpaw, and it'll come up. And the boys think it's hysterical apparently, but I'm as usual not in on the joke.
I've never seen it.
No, James, you got to be a stick in the mud.
All right. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. Thanks to Kelly Klein for joining us. Hope everybody enjoyed this interview. We're going to get some new things happening here in the next couple of weeks. I kind of got the itch to do more. And, guys, I really appreciate it. Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Pat.